Okay, my name is Gabriel Gasque, and I am head of outreach at protocols.io. And before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I have a background in experimental neuroscience. I did a PhD, then I did a postdoc. And before joining protocols.io to promote the practice of open science and in general and open methods in specific, I was an editor for about a decade in PLOS Biology. So the focus of this presentation, it's about the incentives for sharing experimental methods in protocols.io or in any other outlet or repository. So just some general housekeeping information before we delve into the content of the presentation. As I mentioned before, the presentation will be recorded and I will be sharing the recording and the slides with all registered participants. We will also have time at the end for questions, but you should feel free to type those questions at any moment in the Q&A or in the chat window of Zoom. And finally, this is not a basic training about protocols.io. The focus of my presentation is about the mechanisms for getting credit for method development. You can check the uh, the first website, protocols.io/webinars, for other webinars, including basic and advanced webinars about protocols.io. We have also a list of pre-recorded tutorials. And in the last URL on that slide, there is a link to request a one-to-one demo. Now, with the housekeeping out of the way, we can start with today's agenda, which is what I'm showing on the screen right now. We will talk a little bit about the history of reporting methods and of method development and optimization not getting the recognition as worthy of a standalone publication and not getting the credit that it deserves. But that started to change about 20 years ago as methods started being recognized as an important modular output of research. We will also cover the different ways of sharing and getting credit in protocols.io. So, for the first part, let's go a little bit back in history. The journal Nature Methods actually started only in 2004. And the excerpt that you see on the screen is from the inaugural editorial, in which the founding editor said that the goal was to create a highly visible forum for the presentation of novel methods, because major methodological developments take their roots in the cross-fertilization of different disciplines. By contrast, the methods sections of specialized journals, although extremely useful for the targeted peer groups, do not grant technical information the wide exposure conducive to interdisciplinary exchanges. And we will touch on this a little bit more later on. But behind the scenes, what we learned from the founding editor-in-chief of Nature Methods, Veronique Kiermer, who later became the chief scientific officer at the Public Library of Science, is that there was a lot of skepticism, even in Nature Publishing Group, around launching Nature Methods, because they said that Nature publishes research, that nobody was going to read just methods, and that this could dilute their brand, and that it would be impossible to fill a journal's pages with just methods and so on. However, as we all know, Nature Methods was a huge success, and it continues to be a success. But it is interesting to think about the skepticism of giving methods independent credit as recently as 2004, 20 years ago. But if we look more recently, within the last 10 years or so, there are now a lot of journals focusing on and publishing protocols and methods. Some examples are shown in this slide, and the list is not exhaustive by any means. Big publishers like Springer Nature keep expanding their portfolio of methods-centered journals, like Nature Protocols that started 2 years after they launched Nature Methods, and they recently acquired Protocols.io. And another big publisher, Elsevier, launched Star Protocols and Methods X. And there are some other independence initiatives like Jove, Bioprotocols, and some others. It seems, therefore, that we are now in a place where journals, funders, and many researchers have started to realize it is not just code and data that we should be sharing. In that sense, you might recall that it was in the late 90s when we started to move away from please contact authors for code and data to use specialized data and code repositories like GitHub, Dryad, Figshare, Open Science Framework, and others. And although methods have been playing catch up, sharing them is becoming the norm, and you have now more choices on where and how to communicate your methods. So, that is enough about the changes that we have seen in recent times. I will go on now to talk about public sharing and getting credit for reproducible and discoverable protocols. And specifically about protocols.io, we will go through first how most people share their methods in protocols.io, which is actually independently of papers. Then we will talk about the partnerships that we have established with Plus One, BMC methods, and Nature protocols to get your protocols peer-reviewed and published as formal peer-reviewed manuscripts, as well as the many partnerships and connections that we have with many other journals, which aim to make your papers more rigorous and more reproducible. So, when we see how scientists communicate their work, their discoveries to their colleagues and to the world more broadly, we have started to see a more modular approach to science communication. So, at the center of this cartoon, we have the most recognized research output, which is the peer-reviewed publication, the paper. This is the bread and butter, the currency that you put on your CVs and that funders and your employer will be looking at when evaluating your productivity. But we now appreciate more and more the value of other independent but interrelated modules of research, like code and data, and we have created these specific repositories for these, like GitHub, Open Science Framework, Zenodo, Dryad, and others. Methods are another module of research output. And in fact, methods are really the linchpin to reuse. And the ongoing value of all the other items here hinges on having the methods. Because I venture to claim, it is really difficult, if not impossible, to understand the meaning of the data and any interpretation of the data if we do not understand the details of how these results were acquired. That is, the methods, the protocols. And this is where protocols.io comes in. Because protocols.io is an open access repository and a platform for authors to create, share, and publish detailed, dynamic, interactive, and versionable protocols before, during, and after publication of a research article. And I will need to clarify that what we understand as publications of a protocol in protocols.io is similar to preprinting a paper, an article in bioRxiv. We are a repository for methods, not a peer-reviewed journal. For journals, publication is different because for journals, it is the result of a peer review process. However, as we will discuss later on, protocols deposited in protocols.io are citable and can be part of a peer-reviewed publication, or even they can be peer-reviewed as a standalone methodological articles. So, if you are not familiar with protocols.io at all, you can have a look at the URL at the bottom of this slide. And this link will take you to the welcome page, which is a great place to start familiarizing yourself with the platform. And as I said before, one of the features of protocols.io is its open access repository, in which there are now over 17,000 published protocols, and they are all published under a CC BY license, making them completely open access and free to read, use, and reuse. In this open access platform, it is also free to create an account and to publish protocols in the open access repository. But there are also over 62,000 private protocols, which have been created by users who are developing, optimizing, and perhaps just sharing their protocols with their immediate colleagues. And this is the business model of protocols.io, as we charge institutions for these private collaborative workspaces. And many universities, funders, and other institutions have such licenses. The free accounts have only a limited number of private files. So, if you make your protocols and publish them right away, the free account can work for everyone. But we charge institutions for users to take advantage of unlimited private space. And something that I want to point out is that last year alone, in 2023, more than 2 million people came to the repository to read the public protocols. And most of these public protocols are not linked to any specific peer-reviewed article. They are simply sitting in protocols.io. And we will talk about people's motivations to share independently of a paper. But what I want to point out is that despite this independent sharing, there is a lot of traffic to the protocols. About 60% of all traffic to our public protocols comes directly from Google searches, which means that people are organically finding these protocols. And geographically speaking, when we look at our own analytics, we see that only about 30% of the traffic to our protocols comes from the USA. And the rest is from all over the world, which means that there is a really global reach once we publish the protocols in the platform. And something that I want, yes. So, and when you come to protocols.io, you can also search directly if you want to look for specific protocols that might be useful in your research. These protocols can be run directly in the computer or tablet, or you can create your own forks or editable copies of someone else's published protocol, which you can then tweak for the equipment that you have in your lab or for a different cell type, for example, which might save you a lot of time and energy as you will have all the comprehensive details of their approach right there straight away. Protocols.io also has some open communities as well. These are set up as workspaces. So if you use protocols.io, you will very likely have your own private workspace. But some workspaces are open for all to join. So you can also look for workspaces that represent communities that may be relevant for your research. And you can join those if you want to have a faster view of what people are working on in that space and the ability to interact and engage with those researchers who are also members of the group. And before we continue, let me show you how the protocols created and published in protocols.io go far beyond what a traditional static PDF offers. So these documents are live, dynamic, and interactive, yet persistent. So I'm going to be open one of these protocols in the platform. So because this protocol has been published, it has an assigned DOI, which makes it permanent and citable. Different, as you will see, the protocol is written in a recipe-like, step-by-step fashion. It can be supplemented with images, pictures, and even videos. Different sections of the protocol can be coded in different colors, created a table of content that I can navigate. The protocols are versionable, and I can navigate to different versions of the protocol. These are interactive documents because anyone can come. You see a bubble here with a plus sign, and anyone can post a comment or ask a question, and the authors will be notified and they can come to the platform to address that comment or question. I can also create my own editable fork or copy to tweak the protocol to fit my own very specific needs. And if this were a wet lab protocol, I can run the protocol directly in the computer and tablet. I can mark each step as done. If I notice something unusual, I can add a comment to my run. I can keep working on my protocol. And eventually, once I finish my protocol, I can save the run with a timestamp as an independent record. Let me go back to my presentation. Now, let's talk about the rewards associated with publishing detailed protocols. Not necessarily in order of importance, but a first reward for making methods public is that going back to the concept of modular communication of research outputs, by using specialized repositories for publishing your methods, you are increasing their discoverability and potential reuse, which should lead to increased credit and recognition. And I would like an example that I took from Twitter, now called X. So you can see here a tweet from a researcher who was looking for a protocol for RNA extraction from primary cortical neurons in culture. Someone answered this tweet and recommended a protocol that is in protocols.io. But this protocol was actually part of a paper that was published in the journal Gigascience. But the paper was about a fish parasite. So the chances of researchers working on primary cortical neurons in culture finding a paper on a fish parasite as a means of finding a method that would work for them seemed really slim. But because the protocol was published independently in a specialized repository, it made the method more discoverable and increased the chances of people finding it and reusing it. And once a protocol is published, the platform has a tab that is called metrics that keeps record of all traffic and use of the protocol, including number of views, bookmarks, exports, copies, comments, and citations that the protocol receives. And an obvious second reward for publishing methods is the increase in reproducibility, not only in the field, but also internally, in the work that you do in your own laboratory or research group. So if you are not familiar with this, let me introduce to you the Cancer Biology Reproducibility Project, which was a $1.5 million initiative coordinated by the Center for Open Science and by Science Exchange with the goal of trying to independently replicate almost 200 experiments from about 50 high-profile papers on cancer biology. What the Reproducibility Project researchers discovered very soon after the project began is that it is very difficult to replicate previously published work. There are several reasons why this is the case, but one of them is that the original researchers didn't document in their articles with enough detail what they did and how they did it. So what you see on the screen is the Center for Open Science website that summarizes some of the results of the Cancer Biology Reproducibility Project. And as you can see, of the 193 experiments that they tried to replicate from 53 articles, 0% of the protocols were completely described. 0%, which made it impossible to reproduce them without contacting the original authors. Equally striking, when researchers from the Reproducibility Project contacted the original authors, they also discovered that these did not always could tell how their own experiments had been done. Therefore, the problem of lack of reproducibility goes beyond the lack of adequate reporting in published articles, but also highlights deficiencies in the way researchers keep record of their own experimental protocols for use in the future. And that brings me to a third reason to make your protocols public, which is to guarantee preservation. As we all know, a large fraction of the lab personnel is floating. Students graduate and leave, postdoctoral researchers become faculty elsewhere, and so on. Publishing the protocols makes these protocols persistent citable objects that will be permanently stored in your private workspace as well as in the open access repository. And I should mention that all private and public content in protocols.io is mirrored and backed up in CLOCKS, the Internet Archive, and GitHub. And the Chan Zuckerberg initiative has a code escrow of the platform. And modular sharing also increases the chances of establishing collaborators. And we have seen cases where researchers report that this is the case. And one important thing to note is that since protocols.io launched in 2014, and now with these more than 17,000 published protocols, we have never seen a case of a publisher saying that because you share your protocols in protocols.io, you cannot publish your research or method paper in their journal. Publishers do not consider publishing a protocol in protocols.io prior publication. So just like sharing preprints in bioRxiv, sharing protocols in protocols.io is like preprinting methods. So we have never seen a case of that hurting authors. So we encourage people to share publicly whenever their methods are ready. So from the publishing perspective, sharing on protocols.io should give your methods visibility, let you engage with the people who are using the method, make it a central place where you can iterate and share corrections and optimizations easily, and guide everyone naturally to those new versions. And it does not preclude further recognition by publishing it later as part of a peer-reviewed publication. And that takes me to the fact that publishing your protocols should also simplify your work down the road when the time of submitting and publishing a paper comes. So I'm going to use another example from Twitter. See, here we have Professor Kipnis at Washington University in the United States tweeting and saying, what if labs publish each of their unique methods protocols, and in future papers, instead of rewriting the protocols, we just cite them? We waste so much time on methods by saying the same thing differently. And that is exactly what protocols.io is about. So you can publish your detailed protocols in the open access repository, obtain citable DOIs that you and your colleagues can cite in there and in your papers. So you never have to rewrite method sections again, which are usually not specific enough. So this is exactly what the authors of this plot biology paper did. They created, deposited, and published their protocols in protocols.io, obtaining citable DOIs, which then they included in the materials and methods section, replacing most of the writing. Now, the reader, by following the link, has access to the detailed step-by-step protocol in protocols.io. And a really nice thing about how protocols.io works is that the protocols are versionable. So if the authors have updated their protocols since the time of publication, the reader will be notified. And they can choose to read the protocol as it was published, which is now what you see on the screen, or by following the view the newer version link, have access to the most updated version of the same protocol. And that brings me to the fact that because there is a push for reproducibility, there are now over 500 journals, some open access, some subscription journals, that encourage authors in their submission guidelines to include in their manuscripts a link to the detailed protocol in protocols.io. And it also applies to many funders. Sorry, now encouraging or requiring detailed method sharing. And remember that I said that we have never had an issue with authors not being able to publish a paper for publishing their protocols first? Well, in fact, not only the journals do not see a conflict with publishing protocols, they often actively encourage the use of protocols.io. And before we move to the next section, let me show you how easy it is to publish a protocol in protocols.io. So what you see on the screen is my account in protocols.io. Just to orient ourselves, to the left, you see all the workspaces to which I belong. each workspace has a folder that is organized by the file manager, and we're looking at the file manager of my own private workspace. If I want to publish any of these private protocols, I just have to select it, click publish, and complete a very easy, straightforward 6-step workflow. The protocol will go to moderation, and usually within 24 hours, it will be made public. So extremely easy to make your protocols public. In addition to publishing the protocol, you can also reserve a DOI that you could share with the reviewers of your paper if your protocol is part of that submission, and reserving a DOI will not make the protocol public yet. It will just assign to the protocol a DOI. Now I would like to move to the third point of the agenda, which is a very specific partnership that we have established with 3 peer-reviewed journals and which fits in this narrative of methods renaissance, because the idea is to bring more credit and recognition to method development. So the idea is that your protocol posted in protocols.io can be submitted from the platform to BMC methods, nature protocols, or +1 for peer review and eventual publication as a methodological paper. Because the partnership with +1 is the oldest that we have, I will use it as an example. So the result of the partnership between +1 and protocols.io is that +1 created a new article type called lab protocol. And this collaboration is about turning your protocol in protocols.io into a peer-reviewed publication. Now, just to clarify, if you're interested into getting your protocols peer-reviewed and published as a protocol or as a method article, you don't have to submit it necessarily to +1, BMC methods, or nature protocols. There are many other journals that are specialized in publishing methods, techniques, or protocols. You know your field and you know your audience. So you know the appropriate journals. But +1 specifically is a pretty broad, welcoming journal. And one of the reasons we are excited about this partnership is that the way they have defined the scope is that protocols.io, sorry, they have defined the scope, is that they are not expecting new experimental results. They are welcoming to new protocols that might be extensions of something that has already been reported. And the idea is that if a method is already published, but you have been working on optimizing this method for new conditions, for example, that this work of optimization, this tweaking can be recognized. So with this collaboration, both +1 and protocols.io aim to grant credit not only to the development of a whole new brand method, but also to the hard work put into optimizing and troubleshooting a protocol to make it work more efficiently or in a new condition. So the bar is set in a way that it recognizes a good, useful protocol. There should be obviously some work behind it, but the idea is to capture the constant method development that very often goes unacknowledged and is usually just summarized in 1 or 2 sentences in the materials and methods sections of manuscripts. And the integration between +1 and protocols.io means that the protocol is front and center of the paper. And the paper, as you see on the screen, will be bidirectionally linked to the protocol, the detailed protocol in protocols.io, which will receive additional badges indicating that the protocol has been peer-reviewed and published in +1. Now, moving on to the last part of the talk about our partnerships that we have with other publishers. So I would like to start by saying that although we are very familiar with supplementary files and documents in papers, there's a strong push for a number of years now to moving away from supplements by using repositories instead. And this is a really good article in The Scientist about it. And if you want to read the article, you can follow the URL at the bottom of the slide. And these are just some examples of papers that are published, and the journals are promoting posting of detailed protocols in protocols.io. And this is the kind of modular publishing that we have started seeing more and more, where the paper is a centerpiece, it is a story, but you have the data in NCPI, OSF, or other appropriate repository. The code is in GitHub, and now we are starting to see more and more of the methods also going to a repository. So we're seeing some trend in scholarly publishing moving away from vague methods sections to more rigorous, more reproducible method reporting. And as I mentioned before, a published protocol in protocols.io with an assigned DOI, it is a citable object that can be referenced to in a paper, giving credit to the author's methodological work. And the reference will be linked to the protocol in the platform so the reader has access to the interactive step-by-step protocol even if the paper is published behind a paywall. Sorry. And I want to highlight that doing a good job at reporting your methods should increase the impact of your papers, as these data show. So what we see here is a study showing that as the career of scientists progress from being a grad student to be a postdoc and then a faculty, as they progress in their careers, they value the methods sections of papers more and more, as you can see in the pink trace, because trained scientists understand that methods are the linchpin to properly interpret the data and to reproduce the experiments. So to summarize, these slides present some of the rewards and benefits of openly sharing your protocols and linking these protocols to your research articles. And with that, I will be very happy to take any questions. Remember that you can type the questions in the chat or in the Q&A window. I will stop the recording now, just in case somebody wants to ask a question of the record.